You probably know your social security number by heart, right? It's that 9-digit number that's a key part of your life. But what if I told you there's another 9-digit number issued by the IRS that's just as critical for millions of people? Today, we're digging into the ITN.
So think about this for a second. The US tax system is designed to track everyone who has a tax obligation. But what happens when someone needs to file but they can't get a social security number? How does the IRS keep track of them? Well, they needed a different kind of key for a very specific lock.
All right, so let's get right into it. First up, we need to get a really clear definition, because understanding the ITIN is all about knowing exactly what it is and, maybe even more importantly, what it is not. Okay, so what exactly are we talking about here? ITIN stands for Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, and the agency that issues it is the IRS. The two key things to lock onto here are tax processing number and cannot get a social security number. That's its whole reason for being. It's a tool for the IRS to process federal taxes for a very specific group of individuals. Now, this comparison right here clears up the single biggest point of confusion about the ITIN. You know, they look similar, 9 digits, but they do completely different jobs. An SSN is about work, earnings, and benefits. An ITIN is only for federal tax reporting. And I'm going to say this again because it is absolutely crucial. An ITIN does not, under any circumstance, authorize you to work in the US. That is the most important distinction to remember. So who actually needs to get an ITIN? It's not something you can just decide to apply for. The IRS has a very, very specific list of who qualifies. And here's that checklist from the IRS. You'll notice every single one of these categories is tied directly to a tax filing requirement. Whether we're talking about a non-resident who has US income, a dependent being claimed on someone else's return, or a student who's claiming a tax treaty benefit. You see the pattern, right? The common thread is always the same, a direct run-in with the US tax code. Okay, so we've established its primary job is all about taxes. But how does it actually work when you sit down to file a return? This is where we start to see some really critical limitations. For a lot of people, the ITIN is basically the key they need to file a Form 1040-NR. That's the main tax return for non-resident aliens. Now, this form lets them follow US tax law, which is great, but it plays by a very different set of rules, and it definitely comes with some pretty big limitations. And here's the fine print, the trade-off. When you file with an ITIN, you generally can't use common filing statuses like married filing jointly. But honestly, the bigger hit is on tax credits. We're talking major benefits like the earned income credit, completely off the table. The bottom line is really clear. An ITIN lets you comply with the law, but it absolutely does not give you access to the same tax benefits that an SSN does. Okay, but this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. See, while the government created the ITIN for one very specific purpose, the private market, banks and lenders, they saw something else. They saw a different kind of potential in this little 9-digit number. And this is what I like to call the unofficial or off-label use of the ITN. Think about it. Banks need a way to identify their customers, and they need a number to report interest income to the IRS. So for people who didn't have a social security number, the ITN was the perfect fit. It became a key that could suddenly unlock the entire US financial system. And the impact of this is huge. It usually starts with something simple, like opening a bank account. But from there, an ITN can be used to apply for credit cards, which then helps build a US credit history. And that, in turn, has led some lenders to create mortgage and car loan programs specifically for ITN holders. So what started as just a tax tool has morphed into something vital for financial inclusion. So let's pull all this together. What's the big picture here? Well, what we've seen is that the ITN is really living a double life, one official and one unofficial, but both are incredibly important. This quote really just nails it. The ITIN began its life as a simple tool just for the IRS. But the market, adapted it. It used it to solve a completely different problem: how to give people without an SSN access to financial services. It's a fantastic example of the market innovating to fill a gap that policy left open. And that leaves us with one final, big question to chew on. We've seen how the real-world, practical use of the ITIN has kind of outgrown its original official definition. As it gets more and more woven into our financial system, will the government eventually have to formally acknowledge its role beyond just filing taxes? Policy created the ITIN, but the market gave it a whole new life. The real question is whether policy will ever catch up,